Why, hello, you beautiful souls. We are going to be diving into my 3 ayahuasca adventures and how it went from feeling like home to being taken out into the depths of the ocean until I can't see the shore and forced to swim back myself. And finally, with a you don't need this to experience what you're seeking. So, looking forward to dropping into this one. As always, this is Peter, a full spectrum performance. If you can, don't forget to like, subscribe if you haven't, share all the good things that YouTube suggests. Um, but yeah, these experiences were, I would say, like the catalyst to the real depth of the search. Um, we'll be diving into it later on, but like my OG catalyst was when I was 19, 18/19. Um, and that was really a point where I was asking a lot of questions and seeking and, you know, diving into the spiritual waters and just the sense of unpacking the aspects of life that are false. So, we fast forward. This is after I graduated, and I started to really dive deeper into the more plant medicine realm. Now, I had done mushrooms once in college and was actually introduced into ayahuasca through DMT, the spirit molecule. And many of you know Dr. Rick Strassman. Little fun nerd note, I worked in a biophysics lab when I was in college, and I actually had some email communications with him. Talked a little bit about, some of his insights on what he gained. And one of the reasons why he stopped going that angle of essentially plant medicine ceremonies with people in a medical setting. But yeah, and ever since then, it was kind of like a seed thought that was planted. I watched a lot of ayahuasca documentaries in senior year of college, and especially after graduation, I was always kind of looking into things. And I worked with more of the corrupt angles of Western medicine. And right after I graduated, I got a job in big pharma at a phase 2 clinical firm. And we were doing animal research. And this kind of snowballed. It was that soul crushing job that really activates a lot. So many aspects of my life changed. I became a vegetarian shortly after, I think like 3 months after I started, because of the animal cruelty and things of that nature that I saw and experienced. And kind of entering to, summer of 2014, I really was searching. I was diving into this aspect of like, ayahuasca comes back up. I keep getting these impressions and I know I need to do something. So I was doing a little research and protocols and more aspects of Aya, which is again is dimethyltryptamine. Dimethyltryptamine. And we produce it when we sleep, we produce it when we die. Every animal, everything produces it to an extent. And most plants in nature have it and use it. And it's one of those, we'll get into some of the theories later, but it's one of those aspects of the spiritual imprint making a physical manifestation in order for us to do what we do spiritually, the tech that we are and that we can operate in. So, I had to go through my notebooks again. Only one for this one because I was right at the beginning of the journey and documenting things, and then also one of my kind of techie notebooks. Because at this point I was really just diving into like a lot of qigong, breath work, kind of chilling out the body after becoming vegetarian, seeing how many things had changed and impacted since. So we're in summer. I'm doing all this research. I'm doing all this kind of like self-healing, all this kind of like nerding out, Eastern and Western bridging the old ways with the new practices and things that I can kind of quantify and tabulate. And I meet some people on a forum for psychedelics. And quickly after talking, I was introduced into having ayahuasca. So, needless to say, in July, I actually have everything for ayahuasca. And all I'm going to say about that aspect is I put my work and my degrees to work for myself personally. And I didn't go to the jungle, I didn't do anything like that. I just knew that I needed to do this solo. It was a self-initiation of sorts. So before we get into like the nitty gritty of each experience, I just want to always remind people that like plant medicine is something that you have to come with reverence and a respect for, because it's been used throughout our history in all the different indigenous cultures. And again, no matter what you are indigenous in your lineage. All of our old practices had it. And that's one of the unique things that actually drew me to Aya, is that every culture that I could look into had some form of ceremonial brew that had a structure of DMT. Now, I was choosing to utilize the natural fauna of America. So mine was technically an analog or an NDMT. And well, putting the nerd on glasses on, that's one of those things that, technically speaking, I should say, that can impact the experience for some. But in terms of myself and whom I poured for, there is a difference in the containers that I hold space for in this realm. So my first guinea pig was myself. And ultimately, I had just turned 25. And I'd actually had everything for it for quite a few months before I really felt ready. And I just hope that these tales and what we're going to talk about today can inspire you to, again, take your own spiritual search into your own hands safely and respectfully, and as always, geared towards truth. My whole preface for my dieta for my first journey, where from the moment I was 20, when I turned 25 on October 2nd, I was like, okay, I'm going to be doing this. So I want to be very clean. And I took my dieta very seriously. And ultimately, I had that question is, it's truth above all else. What is true? What is true in this world? What is true in this life, in this reality? And needless to say, it was a beautiful day, November 15th, and it ended up being really sunny that weekend. I kind of just knew I had it ready and I was just going to do it when it was really nice out. And I went to a local kind of like wetlands preservative, the Arboretum, and it was magical. It was one of those things where as I was going and walking, it really kicked in. And with the medicine that I was on and have taken and that I pour in that sense, in strict ceremony, you don't get nauseous really in that sense, especially if you come correct with your dieta. So I didn't actually purge and vomit. There wasn't anything like that. It's one of those ones where, if your heart's ready, you're ready. And I get to, as I'm entering into like the park and the walk that I was on with my ex at the time, I just felt everything almost just ramp up in color. It was subtle, but it was drastic. It was so dynamic. Like, it was my first taste, even though I really didn't have any of the language for this stuff back then. It was my first taste of like the cinematic experience of life. Like, everything just felt like it was a movie. It was perfect timing. It was nice and sunny. It was hot because it was sunny. And, out here in the Northwest, if it's like 50 and some sun, it's like t-shirt and shorts. So getting ready to walk through this park, and I felt everything just kind of dialed down internally. All I knew is that it just felt right. It felt like home. And as I'm starting to get in that kind of elation of the experience, the fresh air felt so crisp. I started to feel connected with everything. Now, this journey served as a really good reminder, as some of the ones I hope you checked out in terms of the 3 primary awakenings. It was my first taste of interconnectedness and oneness, that backdrop of love. So as I'm going through, everything is just perfect timing. People are happy, everyone's smiling, and just having great observations, just seeing life. The water was still. I started to feel people more. I started to feel the life force around me. It's the only way that I can really express it, but I just felt so connected that I just knew what was going on around me at all times, even when I wasn't looking. And I could feel people approaching behind blind curves. I could feel people's energy states and what was going on. It was like this instantaneous knowing. Information was just coming in. And one of the beautiful aspects of this experience was I would look up out into the sky, and it would essentially kind of like have these beautiful ripples. And also later on, a year later or two, they quantified like gravitational waves. So I was starting to see all of these subtle things in the skylines where it was, again, like these kind of wave lines. It was almost like a grid. And it was just beautiful. Like life was so juicy. It was magical. And we're continuing the walk and just sitting and resting and just breathing and just being. There was no inner dialogue going on. It was just complete stillness. It was that immersion of doing and being all in one, that flow state. And one of the things that I found really pivotal about this was the energetics and emotional sensitivity, where I was in the park for a while. Time, not really sure how long. It was like a few-hour walk, spending the day outside because it was the weekend. And started to actually leave the park because it had rained previously, and some of that area, like some of the paths, got essentially like watered or like washed out. There's like big pools of water, and someone was riding their bicycle, and they were just so mad that it was like wet and rainy, and they had to get off their bike and like ruin some things and drop something. And although they were like 30 feet away, they felt like they were like right next to me. And it was such an unsettling energy of just like emotional, just negativity and frustration that I just like had to get up and go. So we started walking back. And the only things that I can really say about the first journey was that it was so good, it left me yearning for more. It was calm. It was gentle. It was kind. It was such a over your head lesson of what truth is, of what love is. Because love and truth is quiet, it's still, it's calm. It's being in that harmony with life and others, and ultimately experiencing. And when I mean experiencing, it's like that pure witnessing, that inner stillness. And I will be completely honest, it went way over my head. I had no idea that this was like, oh yeah, you're gonna live this later on. Like, I didn't know that in and of itself was what the end root of, the path of enlightenment or spiritual liberation is. That was it. One and done. Just got it. Asking, you shall receive. But there was I guess you would say, there was such an idea about what truth was. That was going to be some profound like reality splitting open. People being like, let's go on a mission. I don't know. I don't really know what I was expecting, but it wasn't that. And that's the essence of the truth. It's so calm and sincere and just is. That it's never going to be more in this grandiose thing. It's just the beauty of life is already there. It stripped away everything and dialed things down. And internally, it really it uplifted me, I was really curious. I was really driven even more. And I had a lot of fear, obviously, going into that experience because I was doing it by myself, and really had no thing to gauge it with. Again, my only real psychedelic experience again was mushrooms in college, like once with some homies back in the Northwest in between. I think it was like sophomore and junior year. So it was that like 2010, 2011, something like that. But needless to say, I kind of was caught up in my own like excitement and definitely arrogance, because the second journey I was just like, oh yeah, I can have it be a little stronger. So made that happen. And in addition to that, I didn't do a dieta. I kind of like half-assed my dieta. Like previously it was like a month and a half that I was really being diligent with what I was eating, what I was consuming, was being sober, wasn't doing anything. And this other one was like maybe 2 weeks. I was still smoking a little weed every now and then. I was just not coming correct at all. And I would say if there can be any advisory note for plant medicine, it would be this journey right here of do not mess around with medicines if you are not going to come correct. If you're not going to step up to the plate respectfully, you will get humbled. And on January 17th, I was humbled. Like hardcore. So this journey was the one that I actually felt the most nauseous in. And I was also very, I would say, reckless in the sense that I asked my ex at the time, and she was down, so she tried it, threw up almost immediately. Didn't have any medicine in her system. So I was like, in hindsight, very grateful for that. Because didn't want to be responsible for whatever happened from that. That would have been terrible. But this one was really different because, again, it's winter. It wasn't a nice, sunny, clear day. And for me, it was that sense of, again, it's only like 2 months later, like if that. Didn't have my dieta. It was cloudy and just like gloom. So just kind of like stuck inside, windows closed, like no fresh air, like the whole, just knowing what I know now about ceremony and containers, it was just like, I knew something was going to, I would know that that's like, nah, it's not the move. Something's going to go down. And it did. So medicine starts to kick in, listening to some music, and instantly start feeling it. And when I say feeling it, I don't just mean like feeling like the rhythm and the beat. Like I was feeling the energy and the vibrations of the music, like going through me. And although it was very nice music, like kind of like instrumentally, when I was sober, it was not aligned music that I should have been listening to. So that kind of got my beingness a little swirly, because just to kind of keep myself, I would say, like grounded, I had to close my eyes. And when I would do that, it would just be a lot of different visuals coming in. And this is, again, very unlike the first journey. It didn't have any of those inner visuals. It was more so just that intimacy and just beauty of life and that extra HD. So I go to my bathroom and I start to gag and like really seriously like dry heave. Nothing came out. So first little energetic purge, so to speak. Yet everything started to essentially, like, I lost my balance. Like my equilibrium was really off because I was feeling connected with everything around me, but everything was also breathing, and the energy states of everything. It was that sense of looking at the floor, seeing it breathe, but also feeling like the ripples of energy of everything through each and every aspect of my body. So just like imagine yourself just like layered with just like a million different like individual stack layers. And like a slinky, every one of those was kind of just rippling. And it was getting incredibly disorienting. So I start hearing things around me, and it's essentially rustling, it's like chatter, and it's like kind of like grumbling, growling stuff. And I essentially lose my balance, and I'm still on my knees, just like next to the toilet. So like I'm trying to get out of the bathroom and I can't really control my body. So I end up going down into like a tabletop position and closing my eyes. And this is where just everything was just popped off, so to speak. When I closed my eyes and I tried to open them again, I was still in darkness. I was in an empty void. There was just blackness around me. And I could still feel and hear things around me, like circling me. And it was about a perimeter, if I had to judge by the sound, probably about like 15 to 20 feet. And as I started to feel things kind of getting closer and just swirling even faster, and again, it's just like, oh, I like couldn't make out what it was, but it was just very like something negative was circling around me. I can just leave it at that. And it was like a lot of them. It almost felt like that pack of wolves, like hyena energy. And then there was this little blue speck. And if I had to say, it was like probably darker than like this blue. But it was just like this little blue just dot out in the distance. And as I kind of like bring my gaze up, I see it completely just like level. Now, the trippiest thing about this is as I am looking at this blue dot, it begins to get closer. And the only way that I could describe the motion is what I learned from my high school physics professor and teacher, was that when you're moving in a vacuum, it doesn't seem like you're actually moving forward. It feels like things are coming at you in time and space. And that's exactly how it felt. So as I'm looking at this dot, I would probably say within like 15 seconds, it goes from that dot to just getting to more of like a humanoid looking profile, and it just zooms in and it's coming at me. And when it stops, were about this close to each other's face. And as I'm looking at it, it is this blue creature with, I would say just cut, like first off, just like super muscular and large. By the time it's coming up, I'm like maybe looking at its chest level. Like I have to look up and then the kind of like gaze adjusted. So I'd be like lifted up. And it had beautiful gold jewelry with like lots of green and just pretty colors like reds in it. But the gold definitely like popped on like the darker blue skin. And it had, those like old school paintings and like Japanese feudal era like things where they have like the tusk and like the fangs. It had that, with these just radiant, almost like lion gold looking eyes. And again, I'm just like staring face to face, absolutely terrified. I could feel its power, I could feel its strength, and it was just so intense that I like couldn't speak. And at this point, I'm sitting here looking at it and it's talking to me. Mouth's not moving, but it's just like, what do you want? Why are you here? And I'm just fumbling. Like, I am just like, I don't know why I'm here. I don't want to be here. I'm sorry. Where am I? And it just goes, you're annoying me. Why are you in my face? Like, and it's just like the energy of just aggression and frustration and annoyance was just, again, just crippling. And I said, I don't know, I don't want to be here. And as it started to get more aggressive, it was just like, you need to go away. And I was like, I'm trying to go. And then right as it was kind of coming close to my face, like all up in it, I essentially like back out and just like and I'm back in the like technically like outside of the bathroom floor, and I was just laying there, and I'm struggling to like essentially make my body work. And I just mutter out, help, help me. And my ex is like getting ready to watch this like kung fu movie that I selected, True Legends. It's a good one if you haven't seen it. Um, and she's like annoyed and frustrated me because like she's still feeling a little nauseous. She's not feeling anything in the medicine, but like stomach's just like upset because she just purged, like threw up a bunch. Um, Again, like I'm just tripping in her eyes, so I could just feel her just like frustrated energy, and she like kind of like reluctantly comes up and like gifts my arm and like helps me stand up, and like I'm still hand on the wall and things are still breathing, and I just I just muster window, like window. So she takes me to like the little area over here that I have, little nook, and it's a little comfortable bench. And again, it's winter, so it's nice and cold. And I just press my forehead against the cold glass. And this is where things again, if you didn't think they popped off yet, like it keeps going. Um, so all I'm doing is just staring outside and just kind of still trying to process what just happened. Like, where was I? What's going on? Like, I can still feel everything. Yet things in my apartment started to feel off. They started to feel not my home, if that's a way to say it. Things just felt thin, like incredibly thin. And the way that I like to explain this now is that, in these medicines, in these like, heightened states, the veil is very thin. You open different programming and gates by force. So certain things and energies are coming in and out. And I could definitely feel that something was just hollow in the space. I was like, it just kind of feels like I'm just going to like fall through this window. Everything again is I'm feeling everything breathing. I'm seeing it. I'm feeling these ripples. The Kung Fu movie stuff's getting crazy. And although I'm not watching it, I'm starting to feel like I'm understanding. I think this one was Chinese. I think it was Mandarin. That was like, I felt like I was understanding what was going on in the film without knowing what the subtitles were saying. So it's like, it was this weird trippy state of just like instantaneous knowing. And then this squirrel starts jumping across the fencing in my patio. And it had just kind of rained, so the squirrel's a little bit wet. And it jumped and did like a little bound over a pot, and then it changed its texture. It no longer kind of looked like a little fluffy squirrel. It looked like a really kind of, I would say, just like you just thrown a squirrel into a pool, like a wet dog kind of vibe, but it looked very ratty, like face kind of elongated a little. And the tree, and again, me and my tree outside are like this, Ishti, because I meditated that thing like every day at this point, and the leaves and the branches kind of changed shape a little bit. And I turned back, and my walls are no longer white. They're like an off pink. And my range of motion for this movement, by the way, is laying on the glass, watching this squirrel, to looking back like this over my shoulder to see the apartment behind me, to see that the walls change colors. And then I look right back to the squirrel, and it jumps again, and it changes its texture again. Like the hair looks different, the color looks different. The sky is like slightly darker gray, but like not quite the color white gray. Look back in the apartment, it's now like an off blue. So every time that this squirrel was jumping, and it did this like 5 to 7 times, everything would subtly shift a little bit. And then this is where panic started to set in, because it was like a little voice just came in and says, "Oh, you broke it." And it was referring to this construct. Like, because I was so, I would say at this point, ungrounded, in all the energies were changing and subtly shifting so much that I had adjusted like the frequency of the earth that I was on. And despair kicked in, fear kicked in pretty heavily. I still couldn't talk. It was really hard for me to talk. Breathing was still like really labored. And it was just knowing of just like, and temptation. It was really one of the, I would say probably the first confrontation. I shouldn't say the first. It was the second confrontation I've seriously had with the mind space of playing fear and playing despair as a hand against me, the writer. And it was pretty much just like, you're never coming back. Like, just get used, like, this is life now. You broke yourself. You broke the dial that kept you grounded to whatever plane you were supposed to be on. And I don't know how long I sat there for in that despairing fear, but it was a little bit of panic and fear. It was quite a little bit, to the point where like the squirrel had just completely gone off. Every breath almost, I felt like things were just kind of shifting, and it was almost just like just a wheel. Things just kept jumping, and it was just like boink, a few seconds, a few breaths, boink, next breath, boink, and again, things were just different. Things were changed. And then it got to a point of it happening faster. And then I just said, okay, I broke it. I accept that. I was not coming in the respectful light in which I did the first journey. I was chasing an experience, and it was like a full moment of accountability. There was no doubt in my mind that I was going to have to live like that forever. And I just completely just said, okay. And I had so much sympathy for the people that I had seen, going to and from high school in Seattle with mental illness on the streets, just like talking and yelling and ranting crazy stuff. And, what kind of, I think, helped the surrender point, where I was just like, well, I guess I can keep it together a lot better than that. So had a good laugh about it. And it was great, because the moment that I actually fully accepted that in my heart, that I was like, okay, this is just what it is now. Everything just went back to normal. Colors, trees, everything felt like home again. It didn't feel hollow. It didn't feel like the veil was thin. It didn't feel sketchy. And it was just instant downloads after that. Just so much information just kept coming through. It was absolutely insane. And it took a few years to actually process all the information that was coming in. And it was really just about like the nature of life, existence, the construct that we call this reality, like the creator of it. And although it wasn't really like a God made all of this, it was just like the creator created this. It was just, there was just like a knowing that it was like the creator, the isness, the beingness of all that is, which is made this, and like a shell, and there's just layers to it, and there was a lot of just laws and rules, if I had to frame it like that. Aspects of free will in which we can express. And if I had to do anything, in terms of a comparison to it, was kind of just like when Neo's in the Matrix and he's just like, I know Kung Fu. And he just keeps going and just like learning information. He's just like, it was kind of like that. There was just so much information streaming through. And I just knocked super hard after that. I was so tired. I was so drained. I'd felt like it had just taken so much out of me, but it also just filled me up with so much more. And it had definitely been a nice little emptying and pouring out of the false, if I had to express it like that now. I love me some apple juice. A little behind the scenes, I love juice. So, I sum that journey up as life took me out to, I was on a boat and it just kind of just kept going. And it went far enough where I couldn't see the shore. And then it said, okay, swim back, and just pushed me. I gained a really deep reverence and respect for medicine after that. Not only that, but a real deep compassion and sympathy and empathy for those that struggle with mental illness. Because many of them, whether it be by traumatic experiences or their own aspects and explorations in psychedelics and plant medicines, or just natural gifts, like they are tapped into the world beyond this. They're tapped into the bandwidth that can hear and communicate with the different realms and frequencies. So that was a deep humbling. And I knew that I wanted to do it one more time because I was like, nah, I ain't ending like that. We ain't going out like that. So, we fast forward to April 19th, and I had done a dieta again, and it was very like, in respects and in regards, and kept my intentions this time, again, geared towards truth. And a lot more respect, obviously, coming way differently compared to the second journey. And in this dose, in this batch, the volume wasn't as much. The strength was still there, but there was a lot going on. That's when my parents' birthdays are around then. And it's just like, there's just a lot going on when I was actually making it. And, I thought it was a big mistake. Yeah. And when things were getting made, it was just one of those things where just eyes were not on it all the time, and it just reduced down a little bit too much. But when it comes down to it, it was perfect. Took the dose, still just like adventured for the day, and just like was a little bit nicer, so still able to go outside and do things, and was inside still a little bit. But I just remember kind of the ending, and it was so similar to the first in terms of the feeling, the interconnectedness, the inner volume and dialogue and everything just getting completely dialed down. Yet there was this voice that came through so strong that said, you don't need this to achieve what you're seeking. And that was it. But it was just this deep knowing and kind of like okay. And then after that, it almost felt like I was entirely sober. It was just such a strong presence and energy that it was just kind of just cleared the slate. And I would say a few weeks after that, I had started my conscious unfoldment. So we can dive into that at a different time, but yeah, it was after that I really actually started to, let's see, let's check the official date on this one. So it was 2 days later. That's great. 3 days before the full moon around then. Yeah, that's when I really started to kind of dive into more of the, how can we call it? I started to dive into the technical things that I knew I was lacking when it came to like the meditation. So I started to focus on and reading a few different, like esoteric and meditation books on concentration and focus, and kind of going through these different exercises and leaning really into, again, like a continuation of my routine, my qigong, my yoga practice and things of that nature. Um, yeah. It was a big shift around then. I'd gone from working in pharma to transitioning out and choosing a life that was more fulfilling. And I would say the journey's definitely saved me, because I was really depressed when I was working in big pharma. Um, it was something that just was soul crushing. So I'd ended up working there for like 2 years before I got out, but definitely utilized what I needed to know in that scientific realm, dipped my toes in the Western world, and then came back to the Eastern practices. And the third journey for me was the one that really set the tone. Um, and it wasn't until, I believe, like 2016 at some point, where this whole 5 beings who had experienced enlightenment, and they were talking about it, that I was like, oh, that was what I did. That felt like Aya. And then the same thing happened again after my other awakening. So just like almost like each step. So yeah, I mean, for me, it kickstarted a lot. It brought me back to a point of, I would say, self-knowing, where it ended a lot of eras of like recklessness and selfishness and destructiveness and sabotage and just like despair, and depression. Because again, the big pharma job was just soul crushing. Yet I would say those experiences definitely helped me step out of that and transition to something that I knew I needed for my spirit, for my soul, for my heart. And just a few months after that, it was my then 25th birthday, and that's where I guess self-initiated again, in the sense of a year of essentially like abstinence, sobriety, and just like really diligent inner looking, continuing to build on what I had gained in those previous months of experience. And I would definitely say I was changed a lot after these ones. I don't ever recommend self-initiations and things of that nature unless you just built different. And for my experience, there's really just not many of us out there. And those that are, you're dope. You're a dope soul. You're a warrior. If you knew how powerful you were, you're here to do a lot of great things. And if you made it this far and you do align and resonate with that self-initiation path, then I wish you nothing but the best in that. And I hope that we can share a nice pineapple juice or something, have a little drink at the bar somewhere. Because I want to meet you. I want to know you. Because yeah, it was one of those things that when I had told people later on, I don't think of anything when I do these things. I was just like, oh, I had such a self-knowing that I was like, this is going to be great. Like, I'm going to learn. This is what truth's about. That when I talked about these experiences, in my older years, people looked at me terrified. And I didn't realize it was a thing like that. I was like, oh, is this like that big of a deal? And now I know it is, but it's one of those aspects of the journey brought me to such a beautiful place of recognition and knowing, and that resiliency and strength that the second journey provided was a level of understanding that I needed to experience. because, fast forward, it'd be one of those spaces that I hold space for. And many other things that I do to guide people and help point the way. You got to know how to bring yourself back from the abyss. You gotta learn it. You gotta experience it. And then the third one for me, the most beautiful aspect that really did pivot and change, I feel, most of my spiritual experiences, is that you don't need those medicines to experience truth. We already have all the tools for that. That's part of the divine design. And that's my words of inspiration for you, that you don't need it. My experiences of the awakenings that happened after this were in quick succession. And I say all this because, from pretty much 24 to 28, 4 years, I've been able to experience what has been written about in ancient text. And I know I'm not the only one. I just know that we're all spread out because we're here to do different works. But it's one of those things where you can truly enter into a full heavenly role in which you were destined for, and to take authority in both spirit and earth, and to liberate the soul on a deeper level. We have that capacity. There's been works that can point us and show us the way. And when it comes down to it, when you search for God, you find yourself. And when you search for yourself, you find God. And there's great wealth and suffering. And there's great suffering and wealth. And so part of that self-initiatory aspect of this journey of life is to push yourself in the way that you need it. And it's different for everybody. So I do not advise, nor recommend, nor point people towards doing these things by themselves. But, if you are, ensure you're being safe about it with your protocols. I wish you the best in all that. Don't hesitate to reach out. And if you can, again, like, subscribe, share, and I love you. May the fruit of knowledge offer a seed. And in that seed may your love, will, and intuition give life and nourishment, for a tree shall grow. And in its shade may you find peace, and offer peace to all whom ask. Namaste. I bow to the divine within you. I love you so much. Thanks for dropping in. And I will see you Sunday. No birthday happenings this week. So we're back to it. I love you. Peace.